Thank you, Simiso, and good evening, everybody. I'll start us off with a brief context and background of UNITAID's antiretroviral treatment optimization portfolio, just to set the scene for the rest of the interesting stuff. So for those that are less familiar with UNITAID, UNITAID is a hosted partnership of the World Health Organization, and we work across the access value chain to provide products, new optimal products and tools for HIV, TB, malaria, women's and child health, most recently COVID-19 and emerging diseases, by unlocking market barriers to increase access to these products to the populations that need them the most in low and middle income countries. We do this within an ecosystem of partners ranging from country governments, implementing partners, research institutions, communities, affected communities, scale-up partners such as the Global Fund and PEPFAR, and many others. For the HIV portfolio and the ART optimization portfolio in particular, it was birthed by the first ever HIV market forum that was held in 2014, conducted by UNITAID in collaboration with the World Health Organization, that brought together several experts and stakeholders who deliberated upon several market issues and barriers to access of a pipeline of products that was already available or in the making, but were not accessible to populations in low and middle income country settings. So the barriers and the gaps to access were identified, and target interventions also recommended by this group of experts, which led then to a call for proposals launched by UNITAID in 2015 that attracted several partners that worked to develop projects to address these barriers. So there was recommendations identified around gathering critical evidence for use in resource-limited settings that led to conduct of clinical trials and support studies. There were recommendations around commercialization of adapted formulations and lowering global costs that led to projects around upstream market-shaping interventions and product development support. There were also recommendations around driving rapid uptake in high-burden countries that led to projects that generated demand and supported adoption of these products in resource-limited settings, and also overarching support for introduction of innovations from the World Health Organization. There were many partners, as you can see on the screen, that did this commendable work. So as the focus of today is the clinical trials, I'll start with the evidence generation component of the portfolio. And it came about because there was some new antiretroviral candidates for optimization of treatment that were available, and some of them had been adopted in the high-income settings, but were really nowhere near accessible in the resource-limited, low-middle-income country settings. And there had also been missing research questions identified by the World Health Organization through consultations held with experts and other stakeholders. There were questions, for instance, around the information on use in pregnant women and people living with HIV co-infected with TB, for dolutegravir and optimized dose efavirenz. For TAF, there was a lack of data on appropriate combinations with which it could be used. For darunavir, there was some paucity of information around its use in second-line treatment. And also for the pediatric options, there was a lack of evidence on the safety and efficacy of the lopinavir-based combinations in neonates, and also for the use of dolutegravir in the pediatric populations. So this led to this portfolio of studies that we'll be sharing today, whose results or successes we'll be sharing today. So there was the NAMSL study funded by UNITAID and NRS that provided evidence for the use of dolutegravir over optimized dose efavirenz in combination with the TDF backbone as preferred first-line ART. There was the advanced study, which provided evidence for the use of DTG and TAF-based regimens in first line. And then there was a DOLPHIN 2 that provided evidence for the use of DTG in late pregnancy, the DEFT study, which provided evidence for the use of DTG and darunavir as a preferred second-line antiretroviral option. And then there was the PETIT study, still ongoing as well, that provided data on pharmacokinetics and the safety of the 4-in-1 granule formulation, the lopinavir-based one, and DTG in neonates. Also still ongoing is another arm of this study to study the use of the safety and PK of an oral film of dolutegravir in neonates. There was also another dolphin study funded through separate TB investments to study the safety of using 3HP and DTG together in people living with HIV. There was also a need to concurrently fund demand and supply side interventions to match or to complement the efforts that were coming from the evidence generated from the studies, because there were access barriers such as high prices for these products are only accessible in high-income market settings. There were patent barriers. Some of these products were only accessible in areas which had patent laws applied. Some of them were not approved by stringent regulatory authorities. There was a lack of adequate formulations such as fixed-dose combinations, child-friendly formulations, and optimal second-line formulations, and also the issue of the complex transitions from standard of care to new formulations and ARVs in general in countries where they had never been used before. There are also missing formulations that could have addressed some strategic gaps, such as lower doses of efavirenz and darunavir. There was a need for fixed-dose combinations for first line, including optimized dose efavirenz and dolutegravir, as well as TAF. There was also a need for fixed-dose combinations for second line, for instance, the darunavir, ritonavir fixed-dose combinations, and also pediatric doses and fixed-dose combinations of the newer and more optimal ARVs. So this birthed the projects then that address the demand and supply side barriers, such as the Optimal project, which was implemented by the Clinton Health Access Initiative, that focused on product development, new product introduction, and the market interventions to address the prices and demand issues. There was a project implemented by EGPAF, particularly to introduce new products for the pediatric populations, and a project implemented by Medicines Patent Pool to address issues on intellectual property and licensing of generic manufacturers. There was also some work done by the WHO Pre-Qualification Department to enable quality assurance of the emerging generic formulations of the optimal products, as well as support regulatory clearance. There is also another project implemented by the University of Washington, which is still ongoing, whose aim is to develop long-acting formulations of optimal regimens, and right now they're focusing on TLD, or DTG-based long-acting formulations. A key part of this portfolio, which really was important for the success of the ART optimization efforts, was the enabling support from World Health Organization, which provided technical assistance to countries to develop guidelines as well as adapt national guidelines as emerging evidence became available. Emerging recommendations were made by the WHO, but also supported integration of evidence that was generated by the trials into normative work. They did it through conducting systematic reviews of the data that came out of these and other clinical trials, conducted conferences and consultations with experts, such as the Conference on the Adult Antiretroviral Drug Optimization, as well as the pediatric version of it, updated essential medicines list, such as the optimal formulary for the pediatric formulations, and yielded a number of products, such as several policy briefs, recommendations, implementation guides, and a lot of strategic guidance around use of new products as they became available. So this slide just shows in a snapshot the breadth of the portfolio and how all the pieces came together, right from evidence gathering through the studies, the clinical trials, right to the product development, the market and early adoption work in the countries, and the regulatory and intellectual property work that was done alongside the enabling support from the World Health Organization. Many of these investments have come to an end, but we still have a few that are continuing because we still continue to do work on HIV and treatment optimization. For instance, we have the PETIT study implemented by the University of Stellenbosch, which is still ongoing, particularly to study the safety and PK of dolutegravir in neonates, and in particular a new formulation, which is an oral film of dolutegravir in this population as well. There's the GLAD study implemented by the University of Washington, still ongoing, developing long-acting DTG-based product, and enabling support from WHO still ongoing to support work as we continue. Support from Medicines Patent Pool and the WHO Pre-Qualification Department also still continues. So this is just to highlight how the end-to-end approach of the ART optimization portfolio shortened timelines for access to optimal ARVs in low and middle income country settings, citing dolutegravir as an example. For DTG, if you recall, it was approved by FDA and the European regulators in around 2013 and 2014. And 8 months later, just 8 months later, MPP, funded by UNITAID, secured voluntary licenses to have it manufactured by generic manufacturers. In 2015, UNITAID then invested about $100 million to accelerate access to this product through the whole portfolio that we've gone through. And just 3 years later, we conducted our first catalytic procurement of dolutegravir to African countries, which was the first time African countries were accessing the drug. And this was 3 times faster than what other ARVs had been accessible to African countries after FDA approval through the composite effort of the whole portfolio. From 2018 onwards, we began to see momentum around adoption of DTG through several efforts of the portfolio, especially work on the demand generation around the communities of people living with HIV and other efforts. And from 2019, Scale-Up Partners became more actively involved in scaling up the use of dolutegravir as new guidance also became available, responding to the new data from the trials. So this has led to a lot of impact as we see it today. We see more than 85% of people living with HIV globally on first line taking DTG, and we expect that this will be at around 95% by 2025, and we'll estimate that this will lead to global savings of more than $5 billion by 2030. Yeah. Okay, so last slide, just to highlight that the community engagement was a key component of this portfolio, conducted through AfroCab, HIV IBES, the TAC, and many other partners that we worked with during this work. And we are grateful for all the support and the efforts that were made. Just to acknowledge the efforts of all the partners highlighted throughout this presentation and those that we may not have mentioned, and in a special way to remember those that departed along the way, especially Celicia Serenata, who was a key component, integral part of the advanced study. Thank you.